What the Fuck Do We Know, a 2004 film, argues that consciousness can affect our world in a direct way. To a certain extent, that's true. Minds create ideas. Ideas can be taught to other minds, which can bring further action and change. But that has nothing to do with the film's revelation. The producers argue that consciousness alone can change and define our physical reality. They support this via the misappropriation of scientific terminology, particularly the principles of quantum physics. Worse, they outright lie, put forth demonstrably wrong and pathetically inept experiments, edit interviews in such a way to make scientists support a case that normally they'd outright reject, and the film contains interviews with Jay-Z Knight, a woman who, according to her claims, can channel... Actually, this is kind of funny. Can channel a 35,000-year-old warrior god and speak his wisdom. That alone might make you realize this is utter crap, but what the f*** has a reasonably sized following who bring up the film's experiments to support metaphysical nonsense?
Now, water is the most receptive of the four elements. Mr. Emoto thought perhaps it would respond to non-physical events. So he set up a series of studies, applied mental stimuli, and photographed it with a dark field microscope. This first picture is a picture of water from the Fujiwara Dam. And this picture is the same water after receiving a blessing from a Zen Buddhist monk.
Mr. Emoto took water and either thought really hard at it or attached written labels to the container, cooled the water until it formed crystals, and photographed the results. But it wasn't a double-blind test, it wasn't even peer-reviewed, and it has never been duplicated in any lab. Mr. Emoto freely admits this and says he's not a scientist. He hand-selected the results based on which ones visually matched the target word, and applied filters to the photographs to make them even more bright and sharp, or even more dark and distorted.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? If thoughts can do that to water, imagine what our thoughts can do to us.
No, thoughts didn't form the crystals, lower temperatures did. Different samples of water contain different minerals and purity, and even water from the same source will form different looking crystals. Mr. Emoto's work is an art project, and has as much scientific value as a painting of a fruit bowl.
There was a big experiment in the summer of 1993 where 4,000 volunteers came from 100 countries to collectively meditate for long periods of time throughout the day. The results, in fact, showed a 25% drop in violent crime in Washington, D.C.
Hey John, turns out we have something called statistics, and we can check your story. As it turns out, 1993 was a pretty bloody year for Washington, D.C. residents, and the 2 months of summer in question were particularly bad. Furthermore, the Independent Review Board were followers of the Maharishi. They were biased to find that collective meditation helps. A year after the experiment, John Hagelin submitted his 55-page report, claiming an 18% reduction in crime. Washington Post asked, 18% reduction? Based on what? And John said he arrived at his figure by considering all possible variables. Turns out, the variables included such random things as fluctuations in Earth's magnetic field. The year he spent on his report was for cooking it, constantly applying different variables until it could look like a reduction. But the raw numbers don't lie. Murder and rape were higher those months. Again, he was called out on this, and eventually he acknowledged that murders were up, but due to unusually high temperatures, and maintained that brutal crime was down. I guess those murders and rapes were less brutal that year, perhaps with cushions and on comfy chairs.
Quantum physics calculates only possibilities. But if we accept this, then the question immediately comes, what chooses among these possibilities to bring the actual event of experience? So we directly, immediately see that consciousness must be involved.
Is this the observer, and which is so intricate to understanding the wacky, weird world of quantum particles and how they react?
It's impossible to know the position and momentum of a particle. It makes it hard to predict motion at that level because in attempting to observe small particles, you change them. But it's not like it's the observer's mind changing external particles. It's the act of observing particles, and quite possibly just random fluctuations.
A wonderful story that I believe is true.
Let's see that expression again.
So a wonderful story that I believe is true is that when the Indians, the Native American Indians on the Caribbean islands, saw Columbus's ships approaching, they couldn't see them at all because it was so unlike anything they had ever seen before. They couldn't see it.
The reason that they never saw the ships was because they had no knowledge in their brains or no experience that clipper ships existed.
The first thing that came to mind is this: if it's true that we cannot see that which we do not know exists, it would be pretty easy to test that. And yet the best evidence they have is a silly and frankly insulting story told about a people over 500 years ago with no primary sources or references. Really, I can't find anything about it. It seems they just made the story up. Despite hundreds of examples of first meetings between cultures of varying technological advancement, there's absolutely no documentation of the effect they're talking about. What you might see are groups thinking of new unfamiliar objects in their own terms. And if you think about it for a moment longer, the whole notion makes even less sense. From an evolutionary standpoint, being unable to see something that you've never seen before would get your ass naturally selected out of the gene pool fast.
So the shaman starts to notice that there's ripples out in the ocean, but he sees no ship, but he starts to wonder what's causing the effect. So every day he goes out and looks and looks and looks, and after a period of time, he's able to see the ships. And once he sees the ships, he tells everybody else that ships exist out there because everybody trusted and believed in him. They saw them also.
Oh, now I get it. I need to find a shaman who can enlighten me and allow me to see this world that I have ignored because I didn't know it was there. I guess that's where Jay-Z Knight fits in. Oh, sorry. Jay-Z Knight channeling Ramtha. Seriously? Ramtha is a 35,000-year-old warrior god who went to Jay-Z Knight's trailer park in Tacoma, Washington, and now teaches his immortal wisdom by making Jay-Z Knight talk in a bad Indian English accent.
Is everyone a mystery? Is everyone an enigma? They most certainly are.
We arrive at the most strange and disturbing part of the story. At least the full story. Jay-Z Knight's husband, Jeff, contracted HIV. Jay-Z encouraged him not to seek medical attention, as she could protect and cure him with her powers. Jay-Z Knight offers seminars and training camps for thousands of dollars, and self-instruction kits for $275 a pop. The producers of this film all turn out to be members of her church, or temple, or whatever they call it. What the fuck do we know is one big, long advertisement for a bullshit cult. There's been a resurgence lately of pseudoscientific philosophy, urging you to define your own existence by thinking really hard about what you want, and change the things you don't like by wishing they weren't so. But that really won't help. If you want a better job, learn new skills, and perfect the skills you have. If you want better interactions and relationships, learn to communicate honestly and directly with those around you. A better life doesn't await you simply by wishing or praying to water molecules. It awaits you with direct positive action.